When the police, the FBI, and governments finally realized how enormous the Mafia's money flow really was, it was already far too late. The money had vanished. Not burned, not buried, but laundered through Swiss accounts, Vatican ledgers, and European banks no one would ever suspect. The Mafia didn't just create a criminal organization. It built a shadow financial system that functioned so perfectly it was almost indistinguishable from the real economy. And in this journey, where money, power, and history collide, nothing is ever what it seems. The story begins on a small island in the middle of the Mediterranean, Sicily. For centuries, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Normans, and Spaniards came and went. Each left behind rulers, but none left behind strong institutions. By the time Italy unified in the 19th century, Sicily was still alone, broken, and lawless. The state was distant, politics were rotten, justice existed only for those who could pay. For everyone else, it didn't exist at all. In this environment, a power rose, something that acted like a state but wasn't a state at all. A network, a brotherhood, offering protection, enforcement, and silence. The first Mafia members weren't typical gangsters. They were middlemen. They enforced citrus growers' contracts, protected shipments, and collected debts. In a place where police and courts didn't work, they kept trade alive. But of course, there was a price. The pizzo, the payment. And if you didn't pay, your goods spoiled, your workers died, your family suffered. Over time, this protection business turned into pure intimidation, and the Mafia took control of the entire economy. By the late 1800s, everyone from the ports of Palermo to the hills of Corleone was paying someone. The Mafia didn't just steal, it managed, mediated, controlled elections, and took a bite out of every slice of the pie. And like any good business, it constantly diversified. Cattle, citrus, land, smuggling, money never sat still. Violence was the branding, corruption was the business model. Then came Mussolini. In the 1920s, he declared, "I will crush the Mafia," and sent the ruthless police chief Cesare Mori after them. Thousands were arrested, many fled. It worked briefly. The Mafia went underground, but never died. It simply waited. In 1943, war returned to Sicily. When the Allies invaded, they needed local allies who knew the land, the ports, and the loyalties. They found them in the Mafia. American intelligence reached out to the famous mob boss, Lucky Luciano, who controlled the ports of New York and had deep Sicilian roots. In exchange for his help, his sentence was reduced. The Mafia was back, officially rehabilitated. After the war, billions of dollars flowed into Sicily for infrastructure, housing, and road development. The Mafia slipped into every corner. Politicians needed votes. Contractors needed protection. Banks needed intermediaries. The rural gangs transformed into businessmen in suits. In the 1950s, Palermo became one giant construction site. In what locals called the Sack of Palermo, the Mafia practically buried the city in concrete. Public money cycled through Mafia-linked companies, and the narcotics business turned the Mafia into a global power. Sicily became the center of a major network processing drugs from Turkey and shipping them to the United States. By the 1960s, most of America's narcotics came through this French connection. The profits were in the hundreds of millions, and that money needed a place to hide. So the Mafia mastered the art of financial invisibility through Swiss and Luxembourg banks and Panama-based shell firms. Real power wasn't in spending money, it was in hiding it. The 1970s were the peak of this shadow empire. The Mafia partnered not just with politicians, but with bankers as well. At the center of the storm was one name, Banco Ambrosiano. It was Italy's largest private bank, closely tied to the Vatican Bank, an institution that, on paper, was charitable, but in reality was a dark financial tunnel, immune to the law and capable of limitless transfers. At its head was Roberto Calvi, known as God's banker. Through Panama, Luxembourg, and the Bahamas, Calvi built a network of shell companies to hide billions. Some of this money came from the Mafia, some from politics, and some directly from the Vatican. in 1982, it all collapsed. Banco Ambrosiano was suddenly missing $1.3 billion. Calvi fled Italy. Days later, he was found hanging under London's Blackfriars Bridge. The official report called it suicide. No one believed it. This scandal revealed a truth everyone knew, but no one dared say out loud. Politics, crime, and finance were sitting at the same table. Ambrosiano fell, but the system they built survived. When the bloody Mafia wars of the 1980s drew too much attention, a new generation stepped in. They dropped the guns and moved into finance. Money flowed into stock markets, real estate, and international trade. By the 1990s, Italy's Anti-Mafia Commission estimated that organized crime made up about 7% of the national economy. The Mafia had become Italy's biggest company. Untaxed, unregulated. Over time, the money appeared increasingly clean. London, Switzerland, Luxembourg, the Caribbean. The money never stopped moving. By the 2000s, Mafia capital had sunk so deep into the legitimate economy that economists could no longer tell which part was clean and which part was criminal. Today, an estimated $2 to $5 trillion are laundered worldwide every year. And it's not just criminal groups. The wealthy, politicians, and corporations use the same methods. Offshore companies, anonymous accounts, and complex ownership chains. Most of these techniques originate from innovations the Mafia developed a century ago. The Mafia didn't break capitalism. It understood it and perfected it. They once controlled ports. Today, corporations control global supply chains. They extorted through fear. Today, the debt system exerts the same pressure legally. They laundered money through real estate. Today, wealthy investors inflate housing markets the same way, just with paperwork. The real godfather wasn't the man with a gun, it was the accountant who made the money disappear. The Mafia's genius wasn't violence, it was integration. They mixed dirty money with clean so effectively that separating the two became nearly impossible. Even now, every anonymous account and offshore fund carries the shadow of their system. The Mafia didn't invent greed. It just professionalized it. If this story gave you a new perspective, don't forget to subscribe and follow. History has the answers.